Hi, Rich. We'll do a little wrap up of yesterday's Zoom lesson, and I'll try to speak loudly. I can't seem to find a time of day that somebody's not mowing their lawn. So we'll do the best that we can. In this part, we'll talk about the outside spin, and then I'll sit down with the technique book and also show you how you can check up on yourself as far as understanding the amounts of turn, the alignments, which will help you a lot. I know when you're at home, you're having a little bit of trouble identifying where your diagonals are in your little small ballroom at home. But when it comes right down to it, if you even stood in the smallest space, this is what we do in ballet when we talk about our quasi position, effacé positions, and so on, is that we imagine we're standing in a little box, just a little square box around the feet. And so that's our forward position, and that's our, let's say, facing line of dance or line of dance. And then if I would turn around, I would be backing the line of dance or against the line of dance. So if I were to take a step backwards, I would be moving against the line of dance, or step forward to the line of dance. So if I'm still in my little box, and then I turn my foot 1/4 of a turn, there, that would be my wall. And if I do 1/4 of a turn this way, this would be my center. So I'm going to assume that I'm just a little closer to this wall than that wall. And it is the center of the room, and it is the wall. And then if we take the intermediary positions, that's diagonal center. Okay, from line of dance, wall, diagonal wall. Those are the easiest to understand. But if we're going to be moving backwards, so if we're going backwards, then this would be an against the line of dance. So let's say that this is my long wall, even in a small home studio, and my longer wall and my shorter wall. Once I accomplish this long line of dance, now when I turn the corner, I'm on the short line of dance and everything remains the same. That's my line of dance, backing the line of dance. My wall is to my right, center is to my left, and in the middle of the pie piece is my diagonal center. In the middle of the pie piece is my diagonal wall. Let's talk about the against the line of dance, because when you do go to check on something like the outside spin, your first alignment will be taken against the line of dance, so you need to understand that. So there's my line of dance, and there's my diagonal wall, and there's my wall. So if I now go to this diagonal, this would be diagonal wall against the line of dance. If I go this way, center, past center, this was still my line of dance. This would be DC against the line of dance. So when you look in the book for the outside spin, that's the alignment that's actually written in the charts in a moment. So that's just a little bit of maybe help for you in your home studio to try to figure out where you are. I know you can lose track of yourself. So now let's talk about the outside spin. When I looked at your dancing yesterday, when you were finishing your cross hesitation, you were getting a really nice form and rising up through the feet. And it was almost happening without effort, so that's great. When you dance that motion, there's a leftward rotation in your right thigh, which is what produces my body turn, and also, of course, my action of allowing the weight of the lady to swing around my right side. You can see how the rotation in my top and the rotation in my thigh are working together. So we're going to use that wind up, or that coil to the left, to produce the entry to the outside spin. Now that would be the same thing for any figure that I might use to follow the cross hesitation. I could dance a back whisk, and it's good for you to practice different endings. And a back whisk, I would do the same thing. I would have a rotation to the left followed by a rotation to the right, because in any case my partner will be stepping outside partner. The difference would be, of course, if I'm going into a back whisk, that I would take a normal size step back in CBMP with not an excessive amount of turn. But I want to dance the outside spin, so I want a maximum wind up and a maximum unwind or rewind into the other direction. So it's very important that you learn to feel, which I can see that you're doing that on your work at home, the rotation across the foot bones and up through the thigh and through the hip. So that is creating the invitation and the space for the lady to step outside. But in addition to that, my widest area is where I'm going to accelerate my partner. I'm making sure here to keep my back and my elbows working together so I don't pull the lady with that right arm. So I must feel this rotation and an increased rotation through the top. So I have a definite feeling of staying forward as I accelerate the lady past me. Now when I'm standing here doing this, you can see that my leg is swinging backwards. When I actually in fact dance that, I have a feeling that I'm not taking a step at all. There is definitely a push of my thigh backwards, and in the book it will tell you that you're stepping back in CBMP. But in actual fact, you're doing that rewind or wind up through the right thigh. You're pressing the heels to the floor without taking the weight back. And you're pushing this thigh backwards. I have a definite feeling of staying forward, even though my right heel is on the floor. The last thing I want to do is actually step back or step away or do something like this. Absolutely putting a pin through the legs and winding up. This is very, very tight. Now I'll go through the basics of the turn, and then we are going to talk about amounts of turn. And I'll explain a little bit about the ladies part. Now we've done several videos before on this, so we're really going into detail now. And you can go back and watch when I did it with Matt and Kathy, where you can see the ladies part and the men's part together. So I'm thinking of staying forward, pressing the heels down, pushing the thigh back, accelerating the girl. There's space here. Turning. That is described then as a pivot, and it will be described as toe turned in. That doesn't mean we do this. So why is the toe turned in? It's because the entire thigh structure is rotating inward. And you can see there that my foot and my shin are still aligned with my thigh. And I'll have a feeling of being turned in here. So we don't want to turn a foot or an ankle in. We want to turn the entire leg structure and make sure that the foot agrees. That's not as easy as it looks. So from there, pressing down, rotating, accelerating the lady. Here's the pivot. And then when I step forward, I need to make sure that I understand the lady has stepped to the outside of my thigh. Here she is. I cannot open up my legs. I'm going to now step around my lady and then spin around. So similar to the step 2 to 3 of the natural spin turn, where you roll through the foot. You step on the heel and you roll up to the ball of the foot or toe, and you will spin on that foot. So there's a pivot, and then there's a spin, and then there's a landing. Now in the landing, when you look at the book, it will be described as side. It's important you open your legs to the side, turn to be danced. And this is because we're doing a full turn. We're doing the one that's in the chart. You see, my foot will end up more in back. If I put it in back to begin with, I'm in big trouble. I will move away from my girl. I'll see if I can do a bad one. If I rotate, and then I step back, I've lost my balance. So I will be actually swinging my leg forward between 2 and 3, I'll be arriving in the side position. I'll be completing my turn. My foot is now slightly to the back. Now I want you to notice the other thing that we made a point of, where my left hip is. And see the difference here and what it does to my top. Right? So the poise of the head is very much related to where your hips are. When we walk normally, we do shift our weight and shift our hips from side to side. But whether we're doing Latin or ballroom, that's one of the natural things that we don't want to do. When we do our Latin or rhythm dances and shift our weight, obviously that's too much even for walking. It's wrong. We'll always delay the hip, and we delay the hip. In the ballroom dances, we do the same thing. We have to keep the muscles, the glutes, engaged around the hip joint so that we don't sit down into our hips. So no matter what I do to work on my top line, my head and neck position, if I'm sitting on my hips sideways, I'm going to always have an unattractive S position. So be very careful when you arrive here. Here's what usually happens. You transfer your weight, sit sideways. Now my right side begins to collapse, and my head will be in this position. Now some guys do the opposite. They'll drop their head over that way. I hope my partner is doing the same thing. I hope when she arrives from her toe spin, she does not sit on her hips either. So if I'm the lady, as I'm finishing my spin turn or my outside spin, as I transfer my weight, I would need to keep my standing hip underneath me. Underneath me does not mean tucked under, but it means that I have to control the joint. I have to control the muscles of my landing side. It's extremely hard to put it back in position if you already have weight on it. If I land like this, I find very few people can put it back. So you have to learn how to control it as you take weight on it. And what was working for you really well was to put your hand in your pocket, because you can feel that bony area popping out when you land into your natural turn. So I'm landing sideways. My hips are neutral at the moment. And as I move the weight into my left foot, I have a feeling of being on an incline. And why is that? It's because of the angle through my thigh and hip and not sitting down. Now that will accentuate eventually the look of the top as you move into your natural turn. Now I'll do a separate video because we're really going into the outside spin deep, but we will run into the same thing here on the natural turn if you sit, instead of keeping that hip underneath you. So I'll go briefly through what your partner is doing, what the lady is doing. You're dancing a pivot followed by a spin. Okay, and what the lady is doing, she's going forward into what we call a toe spin, and then coming out. So she dances the cross hesitation, which is basically a change step, rising on her toes. And she presses her left foot down to match your right foot pressing down. Your hips are rotating, your top is rotating, and she has a little air pocket here, but your thighs will be very close together as she steps outside partner in CBMP. So her momentum there is what you're going to ride on. Now this is where I want my lady to close her feet. So I want to be careful not to move my weight around too much, that I would knock her into a split position. And I find a lot of the ladies don't understand their part here. So they need to strive to keep their feet together into the toe spin. But the gentleman has to help to keep her right on that spot. So she's done her change step. She winds up the other way. She does her toe spin, so that's a heel toe for her, rising and doing all of the turn on the right foot. It's not that easy to turn on carpet, so you can do it at home in your dance floor. So she's spinning around, this foot is riding around. In jazz, we call that a pencil turn. You turn on one foot, the other foot looks exactly like they're both on the floor, but there's no weight on it. There's pressure on it. So a pencil turn and a toe spin are the same. So she does her toe spin, and then she moves forward into the finish. And because of the additional turn, then she ends up in CBMP. And from there, we'll move out, once again making sure she is not sitting down. If one partner sits, it's hard for the other partner to maintain a position. So I hope I haven't left anything out, but I will talk a little bit about how to read this in the book, so that if you're checking up on yourself, you can understand it. And then I'll come back and do a little talk about the natural turn. Here's a little diagram of the alignments. So LOD, of course, means the line of dance. So if I was traveling this way, I would be traveling in the line of dance. Or if I'm commencing a figure facing this way, of course, I'm facing the line of dance. And if I was to turn around and to step back in that direction, then we would say we're backing the line of dance. So we commence backing the line of dance. If we were moving in this direction, then we were moving against the line of dance. And you can see here that I've just made that line right straight to the wall, so it's a quarter turn to the right of the line of dance and the center. And then your diagonal wall is in the middle of those two spots, diagonal center in the middle of those two spots. So on this side, the wall side then, this is diagonal wall against the line of dance. And then we have diagonal center against the line of dance. So when you look at, for instance, the outside spin in the charts, the position is going to start DC against the line of dance, which means that first tiny step backwards with the left foot is actually taken in that direction. So the one that's in the charts starts DC against line of dance. That means your back is in that position. Where we dance our outside spin is we're over here on this short wall. Now this is the line of dance on the long wall, but we would just take all of that and rotate it, and now this short wall, this would be our line of dance, this would be diagonal to wall here, and then this would be diagonal center against the line of dance. So that's actually where you're starting your outside spin in our grouping. You're in the corner and you are facing diagonal to wall, but it would be described, your first step is going DC against the line of dance. That might be really confusing, but I think one of these days we'll understand that a little better. This is just to help you understand where you are in the room, and also when you do use the manual to check up on what you're doing. And now these alignments are somewhat flexible. Being disciplined about them is really good, because there are many times that just an eighth of a turn off can cause tremendous loss of balance. So it is important, and particularly important, the man is the one driving and deciding. So let's just take a look here at the book, the way the outside spin is written. And you'll see where the outside spin is finishing diagonal to wall. We're finishing diagonal wall of the short wall of dance, the short line of dance. All right, so it says left foot back and CBMP small step. So that again is where I want you to not think of stepping back, but simply think of rotating around the right thigh and letting the left thigh and foot rotate in. You'll always see this toe turned in when you do these pivots, and there you see it's a pivot. Right foot forward in CBMP outside partner, because you're our outside partner. Normally we are in CBMP, and you're stepping around the lady's standing leg, which is her right leg, facing against the line of dance. So we're going back to the chart here for a moment. So there's my against the line of dance. That means my second step would be taken against the normal line of direction. And then you'll notice the finish here, left foot to the side, ending with the left foot back, and that is because of that continued turn. You see that 3/8 between 2 and 3, and 1/4 on 3. So as you do that turn on the left foot, you accomplish that final quarter of a turn. And that's where I was telling you to try to make sure you keep your left leg shaped, your hip underneath you, and your right foot in front of you so that it doesn't open out to the side. Now you can see also, you had asked about the rise there. You can see the rise at the end of 2, so that tells you that you have heel rising to the toe. You're up on 3 and you lower at the end of 3, and while you're dancing 3, you'll accomplish that final quarter of a turn. We'll look down here and, okay, they don't describe the lady's toe spin. I thought that they did. All right, it's assumed we know that. So when the lady steps forward in CBMP outside partner, commencing to turn right and rise, and then the left foot closes to the right foot. That is the spin itself, the outside spin or the toe spin. Here we see this interesting note on the lady's part that she has her right foot forward, ending in CBMP. And that's because of that additional turn that she has to make. So I hope that will help you in reading the chart. I know that it's a little tricky, the alignments. The amounts of turn, these are something that I think is difficult for a lot of us. Some of the engineers thrive on this kind of thing. They find it really fascinating. For me, that was always one of the most difficult things. But when you really understand it, and you understand how the book is written, it's kind of amazing that they figured out how much turn can be made on each step with the partners together, and how the partners turn different amounts at different times, how the bodies are different from the feet. And it really is helpful to understand that. I know this was a little confusing when we're talking about alignments against the line of dance, but in the end I hope that will help you to understand it a little bit better, and also to understand why you need to keep the thighs so close together, and why you need to understand what the lady is doing so that you can assist her in maintaining her toe spin. And that very tricky note at the end about landing with the feet side and then completing the rest of the turn. Now the outside spin can be underturned, but we're not dealing with that one right now, so we'll leave that one for another day.